Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. Hello, everybody. We are back again with yet another super interesting talk. Surprise, surprise, with the artist group Mathias and Mathias. They had a show up a couple months ago at Overgaden, and I was fortunate enough to have the chance to sit down and talk to them at the offices there. I would file this conversation under the inside baseball types of talks we have here on the show. I always find them super interesting. It's good to hear from working artists what their experiences are in the art world, and that always kind of leads into a discussion about their work as well. We covered a lot of topics. I found them to be super interesting and engaged, and I would definitely say they're a group you should keep an eye on. They have a lot of interesting projects in the pipeline, and, they're fucking gentlemen, which is also a nice thing to find out here in these mean streets. So, with no further ado, please enjoy my talk with Mathias and Mathias.
By the fact, as you mentioned, by the fact that you never get the financial support, then you can actually take the leap. But what people usually do is just being, okay, I get this amount of money and I can actually just go to cafes and just having a great time. Just I don't have to do anything.
There's a wake-up call. Cafes are cheap in Berlin. Or maybe even in London they're a bit cheaper. Rent is not, but yeah, it's easy to take some money with you, especially the public funding. Mm-hmm. Which I did. I moved to Berlin to have a chance to open up a project space in Berlin and have a
with
bit
Danish
more money. With Danish money, yeah.
Well, it goes a long way, you could say. The rents are cheaper there, the food is cheaper, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
But do you also do it because you see that there's more opportunity to do whatever it might be you want to do?
Yeah, outside of Copenhagen, yeah, for sure. I think Copenhagen is... the art scene is interesting in many ways, but it's small and it's very national. It's very national-minded. Not that many outsiders in Denmark in general.
Although it's getting better, I would say.
It is getting better. I don't know how it was 15 years ago because I was 16, so I wouldn't know, but I'm sure it's better now. But if you go to, say I moved to Berlin, I'm not German. I moved to Berlin, I meet Canadians, New Zealand, all Western people, mostly, of course, but still people from all over the world. And you don't... Because in the Danish in the art scene of Denmark,
there's a lot less.
There would be a few Germans and
but it's really
American or two. Yeah,
I spoke with a curator, and she is based in New York, and a Danish curator, and she said it's really mind-troubling that we don't hear about Danish artists. So of course we have the major, the great ones,
right? Yeah,
but you don't have the new upcoming artists. You don't really hear about them. And she was trying to detect what is this about? Is this because of the financial support, and
is it Yentalo?
Yeah,
is it Yentalo? Maybe that low behind her argument, but
it is interesting because if you take the size of Copenhagen, it's a city of, let's just say, 1 million people.
Yeah,
Lyon in France has 1 million people. Copenhagen is way more active culturally, even internationally, than other comparatively sized cities. But as a regional center, it doesn't represent that much. And that's, in fact, one of the things I'm trying to do with this program is to show what people are working on here and who's working, what's happening here, because there is actually a lot happening here.
But saying a regional center, you think of Scandinavia as that concept?
But also, as you point out, we're close to Berlin, but we're not compared to Berlin ever.
Not at all, no.
And that's interesting. And that it creates, one of the good things is there's a lot of opportunity here because people aren't as active. If you go to a place like Berlin or New York, there's a lot more competition. Mm-hmm. Right. Everyone's coming from all over to try to do essentially what you're doing.
Yeah, it's true.
Here it's a little bit more like those motherfuckers who just want to, move here and go on public support. It's a lot. There's a lot more space to work in and support options. If you really are super engaged, then there is actually ways to try to finance things.
Yeah, I guess when you have Copenhagen, the city of Copenhagen really is magnetism because of that. You can come from being an outsider and get into the art scene. It's mainly in Copenhagen, of course, in the Danish context. You would be in Copenhagen, of course. But I've been in LA, and if you want to be part of that festivity, forget about it. Yeah. It's not the same. You could actually mingle and get into the network in Copenhagen during just a weekend. And then you can have your connection. You can actually start off for just having one weekend in Copenhagen. You have to be in LA for a long amount of time to just get recognized, a face in the scene.
Oh yeah, it's small, but if you go to a bar in LA, an artist bar, and you get really drunk, I'm sure they will know you the next weekend too. But if that
has something to do with how much you drink,
Yeah, but when I hear foreigners speak about Denmark, they always say it's really hard. It's really hard to get in. It's really closed.
It's mixed. I mean, because I've been here for 10 years, and look at me. I look Danish. I have a Danish name, and I am, I speak Danish, and but it's still. I wasn't educated in Denmark. And so most of my network comes from production work, working with artists to produce things. I have had basically zero luck in terms of institutional acceptance.
Yeah,
there's been a little bit of support for this podcast. I've had a tiny little bit of support for my own work, but I didn't grow up through the system. And I think that's less a thing about Denmark being closed and more a thing about Denmark's there's a way to do things. This is the line. You go through this educational platform, then your stamp of approval, you're an artist, here we go. Sure. And that I think is more like the rigid kind of thinking that there is around it, which is loosening, but
we're not a migrant country. I think that bears a lot still, because Denmark was always Denmark, maybe parts of Sweden, some colonialism in the Caribbean, whatever. But still, we didn't have those big waves of migration in the 1800s as you did, or even earlier in the Americas, or like Germany, different countries being split up, being put together by this political reason or another. Denmark was always just this Denmark. If we're not counting Norway and Sweden, which is essentially the same, right? So it's not like if you take Italy, there's a long way from Piemonte to Sicily. Sure. That's not that far from Malmö to Copenhagen.
No, right.
In many ways.
Yeah.
So I think that has a lot to do with that mentality of Danish people.
Right, which means the system functions very well for starting from the bottom up.
Yeah.
But it's a little hard to jump in the middle.
You have to do the work here.
Yeah. But you guys both were educated at the Art Academy here, right?
Yeah. Right, yeah.
And you guys met there?
Yeah, same year. Had studio just next to each other.
How was that experience? Did you guys enjoy going to school there?
Pretty great time.
I would say yes and no. I don't think I don't think you ever enjoy going to school. Few people do.
It's kind of
but
true.
Yeah, it's some things you like, and maybe if you have anti-authoritarian ideas, not like in the hardest way, but if you have it like that and you have a difficult time with teachers, it's hard to go to school and attend class and go to group crits and whatever.
But it's really an open form, and they facilitate you just from the day you start at the academy. And that is like a liberty you don't find anywhere.
It was a lot freer than the school I went to, for example, in terms of how much time you simply have.
Structure is wonderful. It couldn't be better, I think. As it was, it's getting worse now. It's at least in my opinion,
constantly.
Cutbacks, the 2% cutbacks every year, and probably other cutbacks. But yeah, it was like, do what you want. Do you want to cast bronze? Here's 10 kilograms of bronze in a week to work on it. Right. So
that's a big deal.
It's pretty amazing, yeah.
And it's all paid for. That's also
all
worth
paid for. And you have your own studio, and it's in a location in Copenhagen that is just like magnificent. It's
the goddamn center of town.
Yeah.
It's a fucking castle.
Yeah. No, it's wild. And I teach over there sometimes some workshops, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how it works because sometimes I show up and there's just nobody there. I'm like, where the fuck is everybody? Like, what is everybody doing?
Hungover.
But they're in the studio. Yeah, they're either hungover or in the studio.
Yeah,
just working on their thing.
Yeah, there's a back building or having coffee in the studio. There's still 24/7 access.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's common at other academies, but that...
I guess it is.
Yeah, but that meant a lot in also like different workflows, and it's a place to spend the night if you don't have a place, like being home. People did that.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, it's good if you are already driven, if you're self-motivated.
And that's the thing about it. If you don't have that drive, it can be really a long time to just spend with yourself and just trying to figure out what is this world about. It is like a process just to get to the point where now I just have to start making things. That can be just a hard time to get there.
Sure.
And everybody has their own way, that path to get that point. But eventually people just do it. And I think it's reflecting on each one. You see other just doing something and then you get inspired by that. And that's probably good that you have that open studio form, because then you are a bit pressured to just do something.
Right, you see someone else kicking ass and you're
right,
kind of like,
and
I should be kicking ass.
I have to be on that same train.
Yeah.
But that only works for some people, because I've also seen talented artists just crash.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like mentally, physically, and the whole practice just going from being productive to do nothing.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm not comparing myself with talented artists, but that's essentially what happened to me when I went to art school. I was mega productive. I got into art school and then it just kind of went slowly down throughout the years. And then took me about 2 or 3 years after I was left to go up again.
Yeah.
And that was some sort of weird damage that came from being there. You know, it's also an age thing. I was young when I started, but
yeah, I was 23 when I started, but the exact same thing happened for me. Started the first year, did nothing, drank a lot, made like theme parties and such.
Yeah.
Attended theme parties. I didn't do attended theme parties. Yeah, and just doing nothing because of the pressure and people overlooking your work and always being in process. That's like the great excuse for art students. They're always in process. In group crits, you will never see a finished work.
Correct. Also, because you don't have to actually defend it if it's not done.
No, you can just
be like, well, that's a good idea. I'll think about that.
I was actually thinking about that. That is a great idea.
Yeah. I thought of that last week, but it's such a weird world, and I don't know. You know, I don't think I regret going to art school, but I do see that, like, if that had continued, it would have not been positive. You know, it's almost like you have to like get raped by art school and then eventually you kind of get going again.
It's not for everybody.
That's for sure.
It's like many have like ambitions to get into the academy because it has some like a stamp of recognition, but it's not for everybody.
And network.
Yeah, network. That is mainly and facilities, of course, and you can actually get like casting bronze, whatever. But it's mainly about getting to know the youth culture of making art. Yeah. That is what it's all about.
I also think that's very valuable because it's really, really hard. There's really few examples of great artists coming out from nothing, working by themselves in a garage or at a desk at home.
Especially now. You know, maybe 100 years ago, there was the whole thing about like a gallerist might find you in the attic and then buy everything.
But rarely it was something like, say, somebody like Mathias, who did his first show at, 45 or something? Like pretty old.
Yeah.
But he had been a poet within the Brussels art societies for years. So he knew what he was doing. So nothing comes from nothing, especially doing art, I think. Nothing comes from within, or only from within, at least.
Absolutely. And I constantly feel like I'm just getting going.
And it seems to be that people getting out from the academy try to reproduce that same environment. They are getting into collective studio So it's just like they try to redevelop the same form, and when you have autodidact people that are not being into any academy, the way they have started is like being in a studio collective. That's the only way you can actually get in, and other people can judge your work. Because if you are in your own studio and like whatever an outskirt, then
nothing.
Of course, it will not be. It would be an unseen phenomena.
That's what I tell young people whenever they are like, no one wants to show my work or something. Like, you just have to join forces with some people.
Get some friends.
And do it yourself, man. Because, if you wait around till someone gives you permission, chances are no one's ever going to give you permission. I mean, it happens every once in a while, but it's, don't count on it.
Now, gallerists also and museums, institutions always also want recognized artists. They don't want somebody off the street, which might, especially for commercial galleries, may not be a success.
Right, pre-stamped.
Pre-stamp, please. Especially by a collector's bet. That's a different talk. But also for institutions, they need to know that you have like the right pull on the public, or you have the right politics or whatever.
Right, and you've been doing this.
Yeah, so you know what you're doing and you know what they're going to get. Like, so that's also why a lot of institutions like artists of whom they know what they will do. Like, he or she is going to paint like these black great paintings or do this kind of work.
The ones they're known for.
Yeah, exactly. You see a lot of that. People doing what they always did.
But the institutions also like artists that are liked by artists.
Yeah,
because
sure.
if it's just like a very artificial way of boosting a person that is not within an art scene with other artists, it becomes quite clear to everybody this is just fake, and it's so I guess it's really something to do with the fact that it is an artist that has been developed and fabricated in the environment and not something that has just been brought in from outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, that's the kind of thing where time will tell.
Yeah.
Because there's a little circle that has some pull at the moment, and people are like, oh, this shit's going down over here, but then 5 years later,
it went down.
Who was that? Exactly. But what about, so one good thing that happened in school was you guys met each other.
Yes.
And here we are. You guys are still working together.
Yeah. It's about 6 years now.
But what's the story? Like, how did that, how did you get out of the I'm the greatest art school mentality to work together?
That's hard to tell. I think it helped a bit that we had our studios just right across from each other. So we saw each other a lot. There's an age gap also, which is not great, but at that time it's 5 years. Mathias was 18, 19, yeah.
Oh, you started early, wow.
Yeah.
I was 19 when I started.
Yeah. And I started maybe a bit later than average, but not much. So it was like most people were like 21, 22, I would guess. And then we just started talking about mutual interests. We started like being interested in something ornamental and decorative, actually, as opposed to what was like ruling the ideas of usually what is usually the most common ideas in young art students is to start work with something like post-minimalism or conceptual work, like work which requires really little work because you don't put yourself that much on the line. So everybody starts with doing 1 and 3 tiers all over, or do like a Blinky Palermo painting or something like that. I think we felt a bit opposed to it. And being artists and minded like most artists, we wanted to provoke slightly, but in a subtle way. So we did this insane show of, there's this space at the academy called Q.
Right,
the Q, yeah. So we, back when we applied you go through an application process to make it more professional. Back when we applied, it was mostly used by 5th or 6th year, like the 2 final years of your masters. But we were in our 2nd year, and we convinced them to that we should do a show there.
How hard was that?
Not hard.
Not hard. I think nobody did it before, so we were like...
Yeah, and it just... as it usually is, you just have to ask.
Yeah.
And we got in, and that, I guess, it broke with the form that it was not only for 5 and 6 years, but it could now be starting up being a space where you could also cross between collaborations with students have just started at the academy, and for example a 5-year student, because maybe you would know that person. So then it started to loosen up, I guess.
Yeah.
Not that it was...
It was us who kind of sparked it, I think, yeah. But it changed. Also, at that time, they opened another space run by the academy, but that's a different story. But we did this installation of really brightly painted walls in orange and dark blue. Not that fashionable colors. Still not back in fashion, those colors. And some stucco on the walls of palm trees and festoons. So it was more like celebrating the idea of the dandy and the really superficial and decorative and the slightly feminine art forms.
I guess also it has to do with reflecting upon the environment we were in, and also the fact that we were just close to the Royal Theatre. And all that environment with like very romantic Baroque architecture, and we somehow brought that in to and have really worked a lot in that branch of working with decorative stuff, and also having, because it is, we saw it as a, like kind of a kind of subversive way of approaching art, because we thought, like, of course it has to do with decorative stuff, but of course that is, it has also substance within itself, and we try to legitimize it.
Yeah, it was an idea of breaking with like a rational hegemony, which was, we felt at the academy at least. Of kind, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very engaged with art history, which I assume comes through your guys' education as well. You guys have spent a fair amount of time looking at what has been done before. I mean, even the idea of a dandy. Yeah, that's an art historical concept at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, but it's also a good way to work together, because if you're two people collaborating, you can't really have it coming from within the one person. So you can't have that godly connection. So you have to speak about things, and to speak of things, you need points of reference. And if you're working in art, so why not look into art history? It's hugely interesting, of course. And it was a language we could speak together. So we started developing ideas with these, different points in art history.
Is that still the way you work?
Less so. Now I would say the last 2 shows we're working more with the idea of institutions. Now the legal system, and before that the art institution. Right now we are writing a film at Aarhus Museum, also about the museum as an institution.
Yeah.
So now it's more like interested in institutions, not institutional critique per se, but art about how institutions reflect art and vice versa.
About the relationship essentially between the maker and the product and the space,
and also and the guest, and the space in between the producer and the receiver, and the notion of making something public.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of in a weird way ties back to art school. The fact that there is a relationship to the public, and there kind of has to be a relationship to the public, which is definitely a hate-love relationship for a lot of people. But, you could just make art at home. I grew up with people who did that. I saw people's parents who had gone to art school, decided this isn't the world for me, but drew constantly after work. And they had just thrown in the towel. But if you want to engage with a greater world of art, it has to be public.
Yeah, for sure.
And but that is the thing I thought a lot about when we started at the academy, that it was like a no-go that you would be interested in the public aspect of your art.
Like in terms of conceptual art and that idea that it's kind of worth less if you're thinking about the public.
Yeah.
You're selling out in some sort of way.
It's selling out, but now it seems to be the most important aspect of the art. And if you don't have like the public in your at the back of your mind, then you are actually just an asshole making art. So now it has moved into the foreground of making art, and I think it's a good idea, because I think it's about putting something out there, and then you get a feedback. But I think it has a lot to do when we started making shows that was quite I would not say generous. It's quite disgusting when a person say it, I made a generous piece of art, but it was kind of expressive in its form.
Something to look at and something to feel and something to...
It has a very
think about, maybe.
Right interface that people could recognize, and it was not something that is just hidden away. And now we just work with that, the public as not a critique, but more just active working with that aspect, I guess.
Yeah. Although that's really hard, because we still have it inside of us, the idea that that a public, that you shouldn't go towards the greatest saturation. Like, it shouldn't be accessible to everybody. There is some sort of intellectual level that we try to go to, because we want to be part of a current arts discussion, which is not a current aesthetics discussion in culture in general at all. It's in the art world context. But there's that balance, how far away is it from your average art goer, and how close is it? And, does it make sense to, let's say, for the government to invest millions and millions in art that only works for 1,500 people in the country, let's say? And there's that weird dichotomy. I'll put it to you guys. I came a little early to look at the show before you guys got here, and two elderly women walked through your show, and they were just kind of looking at each other and were like, and then they left, and I don't see that as bad, but you could see they could not find a point to engage,
right?
And that's a weird thing that we have to run as artists.
But I've heard these two elderly women came here because of a review, actually. So they had a reason before going here and seeing our work,
which means they also think about art,
right?
Because that review works in the same system,
right?
A really small, closed system of 1,500 people, maybe a few thousand.
At most.
I don't know how many not actively working in art who reads reviews, but they're kind of more invisible to me. But
well, even me, I'm actively working in art, and I don't read reviews.
You don't read reviews? No, I do read. I was just thinking the people who are not working in art and reading reviews. Right. They're quite invisible for me, at least, or a lot of people.
I think so. And the other side of the argument is, shout out to Kevin Malcolm, he said this to me, that why should art always have to justify itself and dumb itself down? No one, soccer gets millions and millions and millions of kroners in support from the state. No one ever says, soccer, justify your existence.
No, it's true.
What about homophobia among soccer fans?
Yeah.
We need you to explain that. Art world is constantly well, let me tell you why we exist. It's constantly having to defend itself. And the question, after a while, it's kind of well, why?
Yeah, I heard this great point. I think it was actually, I heard it through another radio show who told it through Angela Merkel, that she made this speech about it. That's really a German way of looking at things, I think I sense. But actually, we should not legitimize. We should not legitimize arts in any way. It's the aim in itself. That's why we work. That's why we go to work every day. That's why we build highways. That's why we do whatever it is to have art. So it makes it the aim and not something to legitimize. I like that a lot, and I think it's a good way of flipping it. In a neoliberal society, you tend to view the why in art instead of just saying this as an aim.
And it's been here forever, as long as humankind.
Yeah.
And that's difference between taking sports that it has is within culture, and it is like a cultural activity, and there's being put so much money into it, but they don't have that same. They don't have like the self-critique as a build-in of that cultural activity. Whereas taking art, for example, that is in the backbone. It is within the DNA of art that you self-reflect all the time, and sometimes it gets to the point where you slip the whole idea of what is this all about.
What am I doing?
But you have this, like, taking for example the we form. We say usually in football a we won.
Right.
It's actually a team of different hardworking football players, and they won, but we take them as for granted that we won.
And the fans even say we won.
Yeah, that's the fact. But you don't have that in art. It was not like, that was such a great show we did, and that was like,
we should do that. The audience should show up and be like, we did a good ass job here.
Yeah.
That would only work at the Venice Biennial, right? You would need to have some kind of identity, right. So it would be like national. It could also be like cities versus cities, but it would need to take some identification with.
Well, then we need that nationalism. Like, I wear an Overgaden jersey. And that's my team, and I'm going to go yell at people outside of SMK because those motherfuckers are not on my team. You know?
That would be insane.
It's a good performance right there.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But I mean, I find it very interesting, this kind of tension that constantly is inherent and justification that has to go into it. And most of us have to at some point just accept it in order to move on. Yeah. Because there is no answer, right? I mean, you know, it's not going to help us become better artists, really.
No, also, but yeah, in general, the society of Denmark, all in all, just don't like art, dislikes art, and we just have to live with it.
Right.
Again, living in Germany, you see that people actually care about art.
Yeah.
And theater.
Arts in the broader sense, yeah. They have more opera houses in Germany than the rest of the world combined. I think that's
really saying, yeah.
Yeah, we have one in Denmark, right? Yeah, so that's...
we have two, but yeah.
Is Aarhus really an opera house?
They have the opera.
Yeah, I mean, and that is an interesting thing, that some societies are generally more supportive of arts. And in the US, we have a very, very big system of patronage of the arts by the wealthy, which has its own issues. Yeah. But there is this idea that we support arts for the greater good of all society. And it seems like here that idea is really like, well, that's the state's job.
Yeah. Actually, I saw something at Aarhus, where we're currently in a residency, which surprised me. They have like a group, I think they're called like a group of rich people who invest money, like patrons, as you would in America, who are really taking a lot of pride representing Aarhus, representing the museum, doing something and giving something back, which is not happening at SMK at all. Aarhus is getting a lot of public funding by local patriots.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I mean, that's one of those weird things too, because Aarhus, being the second largest city in Denmark, has the little brother syndrome, constantly being compared to Copenhagen, where Copenhagen's just kind of like, yeah, we're the shit, we know it, like we don't even have to get up this morning because we're the shit, whereas Aarhus has to fight for it. Yeah. And there's something to be said for that kind of attitude, because that also goes back to what we were talking about, having support, like having to fight for it can give an energy that we don't always see.
Yeah, there's not a lot of that energy in Copenhagen, no. No,
and that's a problem, actually. Things are a little too easy here.
Yeah, I think we're lacking like off spaces, like smaller spaces, more artist-run spaces, more internationally minded spaces, I would say, and more ambitious galleries also. But for that, we need more ambitious collectors and
right. Then you need the money support that goes into it.
Yeah, so I think like to at least some extent, private money is all right and helps the art world.
I guess the mix, right?
Yeah.
You need that mix because the state does support commercially impossible projects. And that's a good thing. You know, and Overgaden, this exhibition space we're in right now is a very good example of a space that creates more or less shows which are for the art world, which are for people who engage on this level, right? And that doesn't, you know, and that is essentially, it's totally supported either publicly or by foundations. That's the support structure.
Yeah.
And it's free to walk in the door. Anyone can come see it.
Yeah,
and that's great.
Yeah.
I think Merete, the director, would disagree with it being only for the art world, but yes.
Well, I mean, I talked to her. She's actually been on the program, and we talked a lot about what that is like. You know, and she said she's gotten a lot of freedom to not have to necessarily answer to the clicker of how many people walk through the door.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because like SMK constantly has to be like, okay, we had 8,000 visitors last month. We had 10,000 visitors in order to justify. And Merete has somehow managed to get it to a position where she doesn't necessarily have to say, look, we have more people coming this month than we did last month.
No, that's wonderful. That's all they talk about at hours, just to...
Yeah, and that's the issue. That's the numbering that goes along with state. You know, I don't think the rich people who support the MoMA in New York are like, wait, how many people came last month as opposed to 13 months ago?
But they get the name on a cover platter or or
they get to create an opioid crisis and then use all that profit to get a wing named after them. Yeah, I mean, there's really no answer. This is all just kind of like weird things we have to deal with. But I did also want to get back to your guys' working relationship and the way you work, because now you guys don't even live in the same country.
Oh, that's right.
And at some point you guys decided, okay, we made a show, we're going to keep working together. But what does it mean to you guys to work together? Why give up the autonomy? What is stronger being together than being individuals?
I think one thing which is like the most obvious is that you divide the burden into two. Mm-hmm. So you also have time to do something different than work on the exhibition. Mm. Not a week before you have to work like 12 hours a day, but in general it gives you more time on your hands to like pursue other things and other ideas. And also it's a lot nicer and more easy way to work. You don't have as many doubts, I would say, as working alone, and it keeps you moving forward. As we spoke about earlier, sitting the first year at the academy, the 2 first years at art school, just sitting in your studio, do nothing. I think... Right,
getting twisted up in your own thoughts.
Exactly, and that's hard if you're two people and you have to like communicate. Right. And something that's happen.
I think that actually, that is a good point, that you are forced to articulate your ideas. And it comes naturally. It's not something that you are forced to do. It's because you like to say, hey, I just like read this piece and I just want to share it with you, and maybe you have a common interest in this. It's really a natural flow of ideas that are circulating between us, and actually I guess that's mainly, of course, here in Overgaden you have the product, you have the final product, but I guess the conversation is 90% of what Mathias is about.
That's really sweet. I never thought about that, but yeah. But the thing I like is that it forces you to work. It forces you to not get lazy.
Right, and I guess also if one person's kicking ass, just like we were talking about earlier, the other person has to be like, oh shit, I got to step it up here.
Exactly.
You know?
Right. It's impossible to be. It's up to your own conscience, of course, but it's harder to be lazy. It's harder to get really drunk the night before.
Right.
And not...
It's manageable, but...
Yeah, but usually when that happens, we do agree that we should meet in an hour later. It's not that big a negotiation to say, I got really drunk yesterday. Could we meet at noon instead of 10 o'clock? It's not that hard.
Right, and I mean, for me, I keep saying this, but I've noticed recently I have a huge problem with ideas bouncing around in my head to the point where I'm like, yeah, I got this. I'm done. It's 100% finished. And then finally, after, let's say, 3 months, I open my mouth and explain it to someone. And within about 4 seconds, I realize this fucking half-baked idea has no legs whatsoever.
So it sounds a bit like...
Yeah, and you're just like, wait, I didn't think this through at all. And it's not until you open your mouth and say it that you can actually like see some of the things you need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And working in a collaboration, that is like test driving your ideas all the time. Yeah. So so if you have half an idea, then Mathias gets the other half to it, and you can like test drive it all, and that's quite interesting. So you can also use that very actively, that you can never put out a half idea, because you know it would get it would make some kind of a reflection on that, and it becomes a whole thing. Mm-hmm.
And it's a lovely way to get ideas, to get a half idea, actually. Sometimes just sitting and trying to force out an idea, that's another problem. Is like sometimes, I want to do a movie. I want to make a film.
I wonder what
I want the cameras to be like a bit like, that's cool. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Should look a bit like Lars von Trier. And then you're like, what's the content? There's no content. And then you speak to Mathias and he'll say like something and you pick it up and you start writing it in some different way.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you build up an idea.
Right, you're trying to work with.
So you get something, some kind of foundation to build your own ideas upon in collaboration. Yeah.
So how does it work now? You guys live separately. Is there a lot of Skype meetings and emails back and forth?
Actually, not Skype. Texting.
Yeah.
Text messages.
God bless the EU for making that cheap again.
Yeah, that's
sending pictures.
Yeah. It also depends. If we don't have a show coming up, we speak less, of course.
Of course.
Dead silence, actually.
That's important.
Yeah.
That's part of it. You know, you do have
It's
to.
also important to give each other space, and sometimes, and then we get a show, and then we start Skyping, and then we meet. Like living in Berlin, I'm quite often in Copenhagen. Actually, almost half the time in Copenhagen, unfortunately. But yes, I do spend a lot of time here.
It takes time, and it's close, you know.
And it's close, so we get a lot of chances to have a drink and talk ideas through.
What about the actual production? Because you guys, I mean, this exhibit that you guys made now, there's a fair amount of physical objects, a fair amount of production. Do you guys rent studio space? Do you hire someone else to make it? How do the ideas manifest themselves physically?
Well, actually, a lot of work is made in my parents' garden. They live not too far out of Copenhagen.
Nice.
So sometimes I go from Berlin and I stay with them for like a week or two and work in the garden. We did these big wooden sculptures in there, and they're carved with a chainsaw. I don't know if you have a good English word for sculptures like that, but they're kind of like human-sized, more or less. And
they're roughly cut.
I guess. Yeah. Something like that is like quite hard to make in any studio. So a garden is wonderful to do that. Or like
the neighbors are like, oh, the crazy kid's home now. He's chopping shit up in the yard again.
But the neighbors is my old boss from the Home Depot. So it's like, and he's the best friend of my parents, so it's no problem.
Yeah.
Right.
He just dusts off his car from the sawdust every morning.
But you guys, so you are actually working with your hands and making this stuff too.
And we are, and you have Stensværksteder, the workshops that we have applied for several times, and it's also a very great way to meet up and produce physical stuff.
Yeah, the state has, just for clarity for other people, the state has these workshops you can apply for use when you have a show coming up, and it's a wood workshop or metal or photography, or it's a whole bunch of stuff, and it's a wonderful space.
Amazing facilities.
So nice.
The workshop leaders are so good and so helpful.
Yeah.
So and it's not sponsored.
And that's nice too, because you don't have to pay for a studio the whole year. You actually only when you need it.
Yeah.
Granted, you have to get it. If you don't get it, you're kind of fucked.
That's actually the way we work.
Yeah.
That we are actually computer-based artists that are thinking of stuff, and then I guess then when a show is coming up, then we meet up and make the things. But it's usually the way we work that is behind the computer, and a lot of the new stuff is also about making manuscripts for film. So that is the main part, the main production that is going on.
Yeah, we don't work within the older artist mythology of having a big lump of clay or a rock and start carving or anything. We get an idea,
drinking a whiskey and then going at it.
We get an idea and then we pursue it, and then it fucks up, and then we find something like a middle road between those two things.
Now, is the actual hands-on process important to you guys instead of, let's say, paying someone else to do it?
Well, it's really important to us, and of course we have a lot of interest in material and also kind of crafty techniques and stuff. Take just the stucco we have worked a lot with. Was actually our interest in craft So it has, and we can put a lot of energy and like thoughts into the materials. And I guess like the show at Overgaden here is an example of we have very physical objects that are been taken very much care of in the sense of artistry and yeah, wouldn't you say that we are?
I would say yes, physical objects are, and the work of the hand is really important. It's not all, and it's not the aim in itself, but also I would at least, I know, go insane if I should only work at a computer all day doing work like that. Like, I think the physical output and something which just makes sense to see and experience in real life is really important.
And it changes, like you kind of mentioned earlier. There's a problem somewhere, and you're ah, shit, how do I solve this?
Exactly, because if you send like a sketch to, say, blacksmith or somebody to do a work for you, it would look exactly like the work you want, but maybe a little different, you know? Right. It's hard to explain, but sometimes things come out as you want them, but not looking as you would like it. So like the craft process gives you the chance to like make smaller corrections and make it more as you like it. Or as you want it,
And it becomes part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the idea manifests itself when it becomes physical. And that is where you actually see how good an idea we have built up. It's actually like when you also have that ping pong thing with I'm presenting a half an idea and Mathias brings the other half to it. Then the third part is it like being materialized, and then actually then we can both see this is actually not that good. Or
I wish I could remember the last time where we looked at something and we were both like, this is not working.
Don't say Overgaden right now.
No, but I was thinking maybe we did something before that. Never mind.
But it happens, and that's part of it.
Happens, and that's so frustrating, but also so much fun to just look at something and be like.
But there's nothing worse than spending a ton of money to get like a bronze cast made and then realizing like, oh, this looked great in my brain, but in reality it just doesn't fucking work.
Yeah, it saves a lot of money to do the work on your own.
Yeah.
And it's great fun and makes you into more of a handyman.
Yeah, you learn something every time too.
Yeah, I can put up a shelf in my apartment now, like stuff like that. I know how to work electricity kind of now after doing the show we did at Tran. Yeah. But I could put up a lamp now, you know? You learn something and you can take it with you. Less important things, but it still matter in some way.
When you guys do writing and conceptualizing, do you do that together, or is there one person who kind of overtakes more of that?
I think it is mutual, and of course it's in the same sense that one starts it up and then the other elaborate on that idea. And actually, it's just sending text between each other, and me or Mathias can start up. And when we do, for example, manuscripts or plays for a film, then if it's dialogue, actually it's just like a mail, and then I send Mathias something, and then he puts another 2 pages on that, and then it starts to build up, and then we of course also correct each other a lot. But that's how it's like developed.
Yeah, sometimes when it's really good, you forget who did what.
Right, because it really starts blending together.
And it gets like an organic something, like you're tossing to one another, and at some point it takes form. Conceptualizing can be done differently because you also have different ideas being two individuals. We have like a mutual ground of conceptualizing, but not all aspects of the exhibition does necessarily mean the same to me as it does to Mathias, if that makes sense. So that can be, we can have like different angle or different ways of looking at things as more or less important.
Well, in this case, for example, the show we are here talking about, in one sense, is about legal issues and art.
Yeah.
And how does that come together? Is it just kind of like someone had, at some point one of you guys got interested in that, and then the other person said, yeah, I could see this as something that unfolds?
I think I can actually pinpoint that quite exact. Mathias was working with this aesthetic injury phenomena, legal issue, and some years ago at least, and before doing the show at Overgaden, we were trying to conceptualize the exhibition, and then I stumbled upon this text about this artist named James Stephen George Barks, who was charged with counterfeiting, and and then we started to discussing like art and legal issues and conceptualize that and deconceptualize that, and ended up with this show. And then we had the idea we wanted to do a film. We talked about doing a film for a long time. We did some more or less bad film work earlier.
Yeah, bad film work is one of the things that happens.
It happens a lot, but it's great. It's great fun. It's 2 years later, it can be really like, whoa. Yeah. Not even like a year and a half later.
But I mean, how does it happen? Because it seems like this exhibit is built around these videos, and then it kind of you've manifested furniture, objects, and also kind of just more aesthetic experiences off of the objects of a courtroom, for example, or a lawyer's office or something. And I walked in without reading anything, and I'm kind of like looking around like, it's kind of interesting. I don't really know what's going on here, etc. And then you start reading about it, you start understanding, okay, these are references to various environs, etc., etc. But I mean, can you say anything about that? Like why that decision when you're talking about legality and art? Does that relate back to the aesthetics that you guys have been interested in? Is it the same as stucco, for example?
Legality and art, I think that ties more up to our work with institutions, like the legal institutions and art, as we did with the art institutions and art on the other hand. So this is more like where does art have a direct relation with the public or the society as such? So that we found here in both with the box case, which kind of changed precedent of how to judge art, and with the aesthetic injury, which is a bit more, what's that word? Let's say vague. It's not vague as an expression, but it has a lot more.
It's shifty.
It's shifty, yeah. It's a lot more shifty when you think about it in terms of like visual arts and the art institution.
But also pointing out where art actually and judgment always happens on a regular daily basis, and because you have the judging is of course institutionalized within the legal system. But also just in a daily basis, we judge all the time, and beside that, you also have art that I guess we also try to point out that art is not only, it is institutionalized in the same way that we have art institutions and we have the practice of the artists, but art can also be something that is seen in everyday life, and sometimes it collides with the legal system. And I guess like that is what we try to point out really here, that it goes both hand in hand, but also it collides and it makes a confrontation with the institution of judgment. It's starting to be. It can also be quite, I guess, very philosophical, and we are not trying to be like. It's starting to be Kantianic and like trying the aesthetic judgment. We're trying to not go into that direction so much, but more like on a very more grounded level.
But it's with the interest of like working with legality and art. It's also with an interest in what is the sensus communis.
Coming to agreement, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you meet agreement? And that's what's so interesting in that box case. It was in every way, in any technical way, it was illegal. But the jury decided to. So what, acquit him? Like totally acquit him of any kind of...
Right, unanimously they said this guy's not a criminal.
Because art, in the defense's way of describing art for the jury made so much sense, which is like also... Like,
that is a paradox.
Yeah, that's also almost
right, because it's illegal, but he's not a criminal.
Exactly, right. He's an artist, and like speaking of, they was speaking about conceptual art and ready-mades and whatever, and somehow it made sense to like, I think it was like 12 like random people out of different parts of society, just met agreement about he's not a criminal, he's an artist. I think that's that was really interesting.
Although the laws, I'm sure, did not change. I'm sure they didn't say, okay, well, you can make counterfeit money if it's for art.
Oh, but I'm sure it would change precedent for the next, what do you call it, precedent?
Precedent, yeah.
Precedent for the next court case against an artist who was charged with counterfeiting.
Right. But again, a different jury might say, well, he's an artist, but that is the law.
That's true.
You know, and it does create that paradox. There's no solid ground to stand on there.
Oh, that's true. But it had what fascinated me was it had like a direct effect on society. It had something to do outside the art institution, actually.
Right, and that goes back, I guess, to how art affects the world, the greater world.
Exactly, which is always interesting and really, really hard to talk about. If you zoom out, it's impossible. You need to like take these small micro views of things.
But I keep going back to these decisions in my mind that you guys are making with this, you know, essentially furniture.
Yeah,
very rough, very kind of symbolic of, you know, no one would have a chair like the ones you guys have made in a courtroom, although that would be amazing. I think they should. But you guys should donate this to the Danish legal system, actually.
That's interesting because there's so much art going into the legal system, like hanging, painting.
But if you try to sit on one of the chairs, it's like bringing back torture. So it's like bringing back torture to the legal system. So I don't think
we would get sued. Like that.
They hurt so much. We're definitely not furniture architects, but yeah.
But I mean, just to wrap it up, why did you guys keep coming back to this? The things we sit and write on. Why is that connect to the legal? And I don't mean that aggressively. I'm just really curious, like, because that's the kind of the thing I took away from this in a way. These physical objects.
The chairs, well, say not chairs per se. They were like representing the jury of some kind. They're mobile. They can be moved around the exhibition. They're like flexible within the exhibition. The other furnitures were actually props from the film which we made. Where the actual I don't know what the word for that is, but the judges. Desk. What's that called?
The fuck is that called?
I wouldn't even know.
Let's just say the place where the judge sits.
I would say the same thing in Danish, and the place where the jury sits behind, and the shorthand writer. What's that called?
The bench. It's called the bench. Please approach the bench.
All right.
So yeah, sorry.
But that's actually the props made for the bench,
right?
And different benches, which we just turned around and filled up with documents from the films and research and also more crafted objects, reflecting also on the idea of law.
As a final question, I want to ask you guys about humor, because you guys, the more I get into it and the more I talk to you guys, I realize there's kind of a subtle humor layer throughout everything. And I found at least parts of the video you guys made quite funny. The balloon popping, people freaking out, you know, stuff like that, to me really has a very shrewd level of humor. It's not laugh out loud, but you guys are a little bit like, huh? You know?
I guess it's sometimes very good to have humor as a building block, working around topics that are very complex and sometimes a bit boring. And so humor can be like a tool to open up themes that are hard approaching. Humor can not only be something like it's not like a bullying tool we're using it. It's actually more approaching the topic, and so I guess like all through our practice and all the shows we have done, humor is like a very it is like a leitmotif.
You guys seem aware of it.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
You are thinking about it while working.
But I think of humor as also a way, like, how do you meet people you don't know? Usually unless you're like in a really serious position, you would be kind of funny or just say a little joke. It loosens up a little.
Everyone relax.
But you can still be, which makes more room for like a good serious discussion. When you get to know each other, it opens up the relations between you and whoever you're meeting. And that's also how the artwork and the human artworks relate to the public.
Yeah.
I think, or at least attempting to do, to make it like easier to take in. Because we all know these really serious exhibitions, like really stiff stiff.
A
Seriously.
lot of art is very stiff and very
And you don't
self-image.
feel, and welcoming should not be in that kind of ridiculous way, in where everybody's welcome to draw on the works and party, but more like inviting people to actually look. Here's something for you to see. Here's something I really want. The two of us working, we really want to discuss. So it's opening up to people, if it makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, and it has to do with empathy, I guess. Humor is just a attitude of empathy, and if you are now we are working with figures like Box, and we are not really on his side, but it's like we are trying to discuss what he is all about. But humor can be a way for us to working with stuff that we are not engaged in politically. So it not becomes something we agree upon, but humor can be a way of just reflecting on stuff that are not. This is really hard to explain, I guess.
You're saying not taking too firm a stance. You can add that's saying it's not taking a stance, but it's more like you're not that firm on one position. You're more like flexible.
Leave some space for interpretation.
Yeah, which again, flexible art should have room for interpretation while having or communicating something more general, but could switch between different positions within that.
And humorism is also a space where you can build in resonance with the viewer. And it is then again you have that room of feedback. So we often actually they put a lot of questions to us about humorism, but I guess that is also just a way to approaching our audience, actually.
Yeah, the humor is quite a popular question. Not that we get interviewed every day, but in group crits and such, people always ask about the humor, and they're like, oftentimes it's called like people thinking maybe we were a bit mean, more like asking why the irony, or why are you keeping this in arm's length, or why are you using humor in that way? Why are you not sincere? I think many people felt at some point that's not happening that much anymore. Well, it did actually. With Artie, there was a lot of criticism about being too.
Well, I feel like our humor is very difficult. I wish to have more humor in my work, but I haven't figured out how to do it. In honesty, it's really, really hard.
Get a collaborator.
True. Yeah, I mean, because you have to take yourself seriously, but not too seriously. And like you say, it disarms people. It's a great way to reach in to people in a sense. But then, of course, there are the people who are serious all the time who are like, hey, why aren't you as serious as I am?
Yeah, that's true. But actually, something we often say when we like each other's ideas is actually, I noticed is like,
this is funny.
Yeah, that's fun. That's funny. Yeah. So that's also working with other people. I noticed that if you propose an idea and they say, yeah, that's kind of funny, and not burst out laughing, but say, yeah, that's kind of funny.
And that's basically the same as saying that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes me think.
Right. It makes me think, and it makes me enjoy myself in some way.
That's a great place to leave it. Well, thanks, guys. You've been very generous with your time. We've been here for over an hour.
Thanks so
you're
much.
welcome.
So,
thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And that was that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by RC. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people. I'm not kidding, this is episode 118. There are a lot of conversations on there. That's on our courtroom of a website, culturalbandwidth.com. You can also check out the other show we have going over there. It's called By the Way. It's an art news podcast. Check it out. If you do like this show, we would appreciate it if you take the time to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It'll help others find us. Thank you so much for joining us.